Hi guys, this is GSNknown.com and I'm here with a handset called the UHANS A101s. This is a full review of the device. We're dealing with an affordable 5-incher that's available in a 3G version and in a 4G version. Well, we have the 3G model, which is signaled by the S here in the name. The 4G one doesn't have an S, so you can discern between the two. So it has a different CPU from the 4G version, and of course the 3G one is more affordable. It's priced at $67 on gearbest.com. Just so you know, interestingly, the 4G version is $65 on the same retailer. So you have a quad-core plastic phone which has almost entry-level specs, basically low mid-range. It's available in gray, gold or pink, and I can consider it sort of a Galaxy J3 rival. So as far as the design is concerned, the phone is obviously made of plastic. The back cover is removable, but you will surely break a fingernail because it's very sturdily attached. We have a 2.5D glass panel at the front, and once again polycarbonate, but the frame also includes a bit of metal to keep things solid. So it's a 5-incher and it measures a pretty hefty 9.5mm in thickness and weighs 118 grams. It's important to mention that it's 20 grams lighter than the Samsung Galaxy J3 2016, which is one of its main rivals. It has a pretty okay grip and build, and you can even use it with one hand without any trace of hassle. It has some nice curves here and there, as you can see throughout the design. The back is gently curved, the corners are curved, and it has a pretty nice shine to it in the corners. In the end, it has a generic design. It's not exactly fancy looking, but it does its job and it's comfortable to hold with one hand. Now, as far as the display goes, I keep telling you it's a 5-incher with an IPS LCD panel and a 720p resolution, 2.5D panel at the front, and quite big bezels. Now, the video player, which is here, will help us test the capacity of the screen. Okay, so this is the pre-installed player with an option that lets you use a sort of picture-in-picture mode. It's pop-up play basically, and the actual viewing experience offers pretty good brightness, mediocre contrast, some washed out colors, but the view angles are pretty wide, so that's okay. And I felt that the image has too much white in it, so the white really stands out and pokes your eyes out, so to say. Okay, so now that those were the first impressions, let's see how the phone is able to handle its brightness test. But before the brightness test, let's check out the pixels of the screen and their setups. So we got this usual setup of the RGB stripes kind, and then we did a lux meter test and achieved the result of 350 lux units, which is good considering the price tag below $100, and is the equal of the LG AKA. It beats the LG G3 and also the Huawei Honor 7, but scores below the Huawei Nova and the Lenovo K6. Of course, we have quite a few settings which are related to the screen, so let's see them here. Go to the display and we got mirror vision with a few sub options. We got the picture mode, which is standard, vivid or user mode, and the user mode triggers extra features itself. So contrast, saturation, brightness, sharpness, color temperature and dynamic contrast are all here, but I suggest you stick with standard. And then we have brightness level, adaptive brightness, there's wallpaper, sleep, daydream, font size, and that's pretty much it. In the end, I have to say it's a good screen considering the price tag, but keep in mind that the colors feel a bit washed out. Now, as far as the other specs are concerned, we get a pretty old CPU, a quad-core MediaTek MT6580. It's clocked at 1.3 GHz and has the Mali 400 Classic GPU on board. We also get 2 GB of RAM and 16 GB of storage, as well as a microSD card slot. In general, I did not face any lag, although the apps on this phone will take a bit to open up. So if you want to start an app, you'll see that it takes a bit longer than you'd want for the app to open, but no lag per se. Now, the game test involves the famous Riptide GP Renegade, which we played, and which sadly has a trace and a hint of lag, takes a while to load everything up, and then there's the occasional stutter. You can enjoy the gameplay experience, don't get me wrong, but every once in a while a stutter will sneak in and remind you this is a lower end phone with a pretty old CPU and a price below $100. Okay, so this is the latest Riptide title. So far so good. Of course, it may look nice on the small screen, but in real life there are some frames loose and some stuttering. Okay, and now let's get to the benchmarks, because we also did those, and let's see what's happening in that area. So we did the usual tests that involve the quadrant, Antutu, and all the works, so let's check them out. We start off with quadrant, and in quadrant we beat the Huawei Honor 4X but scored below the old, very old HTC One Mini, the first one, and then in Antutu 6 the score looks pretty decent. We're at the level of the Asus Zenfone Max and below the iHunt Freedom, for example. Well, at least we beat the Orange Dive 71. And in the gamers benchmark, as I like to call it, which is 3D Mark Ice Storm Unlimited, we have a very modest score, which places us almost among the last 10 or 13 phones from all the handsets we've ever tested. Well, at least it beats the all-view P8 Energy Mini. This is certainly no race horse. It sacrifices processing power in favor of a lower price. Now let's see if the temperature is also sacrificed. We achieved a pretty decent 35.7 degrees Celsius after running the benchmark GFX bench, and after running the game you saw before, well, overheating struck 41.9 degrees Celsius, so yes, that's overheating and it's a bit of a bummer. Okay, now that the performance is out of the way and it's modest, like the price of the phone, we get the battery. Inside this handset there's a removable unit here at the back. It's a lithium-ion 2450 mAh battery with a 5V 1A charging, which should be fast on paper, but in real life you'll see the real result. Now let's see our tests for the battery and how fast the phone functions. So when it comes to HD video playback in a loop, we're totally disappointed. Only 4 hours and 19 minutes, which is very poor. It's actually one of the last 4 phones in our top 135 or so. Well, this one is the 131st. Anyway, it beats the LG G Flex 2 somehow and the iHunt Freedom, but scores below the M-Star S700 and the UHANS S1. We also did a PC Mark test, so let's see how that turned out. The result is a bit better, so 5 hours and 15 minutes. It's okay this time, considering the price tag. We beat the LTV 1S and the Huawei P8 Lite, but scored below the Coolpad Modena and the modest Xperia E4. The charging requires 2 hours and 23 minutes, not impressive, and below the TP-Link Nefos C5 Max. Yes, TP-Link, the router maker, now makes phones. Anyways, in the settings you have standby intelligent power saving, battery saver, and of course battery optimization, which is basically those. So sadly the battery is rather mediocre. Now as far as the acoustics go, you can see here the speaker holes. There are 6 of them if I counted right, and let's see what the music player is all about. It's called Music. It may look, well, different from Google Play Music, but at least it has an equalizer. So sound effect setting, and it's actually the stock equalizer with the usual genre settings, 5 channels, bass boost, surround sound, and preset reverb, which you may actually need because there's a strong lack of bass here, as you'll hear in an instant. Okay, conclusions. We have a very high volume, that's for sure, but the speaker has that old radio feel. It's basically a broken sound a bit. The bass is lacking, but at least there's no distortion and the quality is, I would say, decent. Also, there's no muffling on a flat surface because the speaker is not at the back. We're also lacking headphones, no headphones provided here. And let's see how the device did in our decibel meter test. So here we go. So we achieved a result that's pretty solid here, 92.2 decibels with our usual audio sample, and then we move to the gaming and movies and stuff like that, and we achieved 95 decibels, which is a very solid result. It's actually a top 3 result from all the phones we've tested, scores below the BlackBerry Passport by a little and above the Galaxy S6 and the iPhone 7, for example. But in the end it may be loud, but it lacks bass and the punch that's required to achieve a nice sound. Speaking of sound, we also have some special options here, so let's see them. Sound enhancement, BS, audio enhance, loudness and surround. I'm pretty happy with the results, and as far as I know there should also be FM radio here. Yes, we got FM radio. Now it's time to discuss the camera. It's a modest setup, you're probably expecting that. We get an 8 megapixel shooter at the back with LED flash and 13 megapixel shots via interpolation and a 2 megapixel shooter at the front, so nothing important to expect here. I will not even insist too much on the camera interface, it's very basic, there is nothing fancy here. We only have HDR, watermark, panorama, beauty, normal and night, and some other options here like grid, gesture shot, and that's it. So not many things, there's no shutter, there's no ISO, there's no fancy things, just that. And the camera app opens up slowly, the focus is also rather slow, but the zoom is quite fluid. So skipping the talk, we go to the camera test and see how the camera did during the daytime. So we took these shots in very early December on a somehow sunny day, and the shots were quite a bit washed out, and the background feels a bit blurry. When you find that the shot looks nice, you only have to look at the background, see that it's blurred, while the foreground is quite clear. There are not a lot of details here as expected from an 8 megapixel shooter, but somehow the brightness is quite okay. The panorama is taken like this, somehow it was turned around the wrong way. Anyway, the resolution is very modest, which is 560 over 5632 pixels, and when you get to areas that have better lighting, keep in mind that the colors get a bit better. As you can see here, they're quite vivid, but they're also pretty realistic compared to what we saw in real life. So objects have a good texture, and with patience you can achieve some proper close-ups, but nothing more than that. Of course, we also have some nifty effects like this one, which is film, and it's just a gimmick in the end, but nice to know we have that. So we also have HDR, which corrected the color of the grass at some point, and the selfies are, well, mediocre. You can discern there's a person in there, but not more than that. So poor details in landscape shots, some blur and a fog, and somehow these ducks, when we zoomed onto them, were pretty clear. One advice to remember here, do not take moving shots with this phone. Either you're moving or the subject is moving, there will be failures. So be patient, focus, and you may get a few Facebook worthy shots. Otherwise, the camera is not worth the effort. I've seen better 8 megapixel shooters 3 years ago, so I can compare it to the first Motorola Moto G phone if you really want a thermal comparison. So that's daytime shots. Now let's see the nighttime shots. Okay, so you're probably expecting them not to be good, and we have blurry and foggy shots galore, but the colors are quite okay. The flash seems to have no power, so not a very strong flash, makes things blue. And we have big streetlight halos, some ghosting. The brightness was just okay, so nothing impressive in the end in this area as well. Now let's go to the video capture. It's in my least favorite format, 3GPP, Full HD, 30 frames per second and a 24 megabits per second bitrate, which is not bad. So let's find a video here, like this one for example. Okay, so we're dealing with lots of refocusing, some flicker, okay calibrated colors, not a bad exposure, and the clarity is, well, passable for the price tag. Too bad for that refocusing, otherwise we would be pleasantly impressed by this area of the phone. Okay, another capture. Of course, when you start to zoom in, you lose a lot of quality, things will appear pixelated. The microphone is rather weak, and refocusing is a bummer. But the colors and the brightness are quite okay. That's daytime. During the night, things get worse. 16 frames per second, 18 megabits per second bitrate, and it goes like this. It's violet, it has a ghosting effect, it's shaky, but the clarity is okay. We got big streetlight halos, and everything seems to be moving with a motion blur, so you can actually neglect this, forget about filming during the nighttime. So that's the camera in a nutshell, a lot of compromises to achieve the price. And now we go to the web browsing experience. We have Chrome pre-installed, and let's try and load up gsmdown.com. So we have a new theme, folks. Hope you like the theme. It's not its fault for this big loading time, it's actually the fault of the phone, which also achieved poor results in Velamo and SunSpider, the benchmarks used to measure the browser's performance. So pretty slow browser even though it's Chrome, and we got a stock virtual keyboard that's rather comfy. Now, on the connectivity side, this one is a dual SIM phone. It comes with dual SIM dual standby setup, micro SIM card slots, micro USB port at the bottom. There's 3G tops, no trace of 4G. There's also Wi-Fi BGN, Bluetooth 4.0 and GPS. Now as far as the calls are concerned, we got a pretty okay clarity and a mid-level volume plus an okay signal, but the noise cancelling is not impressive at all. Let's see now how the speed test was handled here. So because we also did it, keep in mind at all time this is a 3G phone, it's not a 4G phone, and these are the speeds we achieved. In Wi-Fi up to 47 Mbps download, 25 Mbps in upload, and in 3G 8.3 Mbps download, 4.4 Mbps upload, and there is that. Not impressive, just okay once again for the price tag. Now we get to the software of the device. You can probably tell already that it's being customized. It's Android 6.0 Marshmallow with a custom UI on top. It has very childish icons, so to say. They're very minimalistic, very basic and very colorful, sort of like bonbons, but in an exaggerated fashion. The drop-down area includes notifications and quick settings with a very nifty feature. It's called record screen, and you can actually record the video from the screen, the image of the screen and the stuff you do. Now if you keep the screen pressed, you'll trigger several options. We got plugins, which are basically the widgets. We got the theme, which you can change and download quite a few more. And this area with an exclusive space, basically an expanded widget that takes up a whole home screen. Okay, then there are the wallpapers and the settings that have to do with cursor, so you can leave behind little hearts if you want to. So that's one option. Let's see what else. We got home screen settings, arrangement of icons, transitions, and so forth. Launcher settings with a layout and desktop loop, lock screen settings, gesture settings with slide and double click, and that's that. Okay, now as far as the multitasking is concerned, you keep this pressed and it's the usual carousel. Okay, and if you press this, you can actually uninstall apps by pressing this little X above them, just like on iOS, so that may feel familiar. Okay, other things worth mentioning here, well, the settings area, but there's nothing fancy here. One would expect to find a fingerprint scanner, well, we don't, there is no fingerprint scanner here. We do have smart settings related to gestures and things like that, but nothing truly fancy. Okay, so those are all the settings. Now let's talk about the apps. As you can see, all the apps are placed on the home screens, and you have an extra home screen for you to search on whatever you want: Google, YouTube, Pinterest, Facebook, Yahoo, Amazon, and so forth. Now the pre-installed apps, I counted them. They're a pretty decent 29, that's the number. When I see 40 or 50, I know it's bloatware, but at 29, I would say we're doing okay. Among the apps to remember, there's Team Club, One Tap Lock Screen, a bunch of tools that may come in handy, the media applications, play games, and that's basically it, plus a weather app. So no fingerprint scanner here, keep that in mind, and a pretty ugly user interface if we're being honest. Now the UHANS A101s, it's time for its verdict at gsm.com. So on the pro side, it's a cheap phone, quite affordable, it's very loud when it comes to the speaker. It has a pretty okay brightness for the screen, the lag isn't huge in day-to-day use, the photos have at least good clarity, and I have to say that the video playback time is almost acceptable for the price tag, almost. The customized user interface and the OS may be fancy for some people, well, not for us, so if you like to customize your experience, you may appreciate it, if not, well, not. Those are the pros. Now on the cons, there's no fingerprint scanner, the interface is not nice to look at, it's actually quite ugly, the back cover is almost impossible to remove without chipping a nail. We only have 3G, no trace of 4G, the performance is rather poor in benchmarks and even day-to-day use, there's some overheating, we have a weak battery overall, and the camera is unimpressive because of its refocusing especially. Now, this UHANS phone is mediocre at everything minus the volume, so you may buy it as a second or third phone meant for music playback. It has 3G, it has a camera that's passable in most areas, the performance is good for casual games, and that's basically it. I cannot recommend it for 67 bucks. Well, you may want to attach another 30 bucks to it and get a more solid phone, some even with 4 GB of RAM. This has been the review of the UHANS A101s from gsm.com. Bye bye.